This is an extremely rare silver-mounted, ebony-veneered, month-duration longcase clock by Joseph Knibb, who was one of England's greatest clockmakers. It's thought that there are perhaps as few as only 6 of these ebony clocks made by Joseph Knibb in existence today. His walnut longcase clocks were more prevalent because in the late 17th century, ebony was a much more expensive and highly prized wood. When he was making an ebony longcase clock, Knibb often added a silver chaptering, because although silver was highly prized and very expensive at the time, the combination of ebony and silver harmonized to produce a wonderful, opulent longcase clock. The elegant 6-foot 9-inch clock case has an oak carcass, which has been veneered with ebony. The plinth base is raised on ebonized bun feet, and above the plinth is an elegant panelled trunk door, set with an oval brass-framed lenticle to display the pendulum. Just above the door is the original gilt-brass satyr mask mount, which Knibb occasionally used on some of his other ebony longcase clocks. The rising hood is flanked by the original twist columns with well-pierced ebony sound frets in the friezes, and the whole clock is surmounted by a shallow caddy top with 3 brass ball finials. The 10-inch square gilt brass dial is a very beautiful example of why Knibb's clockmaking is so revered by collectors today. The matting has the most extraordinarily well-preserved, even finish to it. The chapter ring and the seconds ring are both made of solid silver. Just look at how delicate this chapter ring is. I'm just holding it in my hands here and it's paper thin. If I don't hold it evenly, it could bend. You'll note that instead of the 4 strokes for the chapter 4, there's the Roman 1V, indicating that this movement uses Knibb's special Roman striking system, whereby the large bell, giving a lower tone, is sounded to represent the V and X, and a small bell with higher tone is sounded to represent the ones. The hands are original and the hour hand is delicately pierced and chamfered, whilst the minute hand has been given a most unusual serpentine finish. Lastly, I'd like to draw your attention to the very fine wheatear engraved border around the dial plate and the delicately chased and engraved gilt brass winged cherub spandrels. The dial feet and the 5 ringed pillars of the movement are all latched. The movement plates are delicate and the 2 bells above the movement are for Knibb's Roman striking system. The larger one, typically for Knibb, is of pork pie form. The anchor escapement has Knibb's typical butterfly nut regulation above the suspension block, and the original brass rod pendulum has a further butterfly nut to grasp when adjusting the height of the bob. Note the very lovely brass-cased month-going weights, which are beautiful period examples and very likely to be original to the clock. Lastly, I would just like to touch on the provenance of this very beautiful clock, because it is worth noting. During the latter part of the 19th and 20th centuries, the clock formed part of an important private collection of over 200 early English clocks that were amassed by the avid collector David Wetherfield. The collection was dispersed on Wetherfield's death in 1930, but in the books that have since recorded the Wetherfield collection, this clock is illustrated in full with a separate image of its very lovely dial. Its illustration in such an important private collection gives this clock an added collector's dimension. And when you combine that with its wonderful, opulent and complex movement, we have here one of the most desirable clocks that any collector could ever wish for.